Today I'm with Bernardo, the co-founder of Arquitectonica, and today we're going to be talking about the Miami skyline, what's coming to our community, and specifically this development here, the HueHub. Bernardo, thank you for your time.
A pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So for those of you that may not know, he is the architect behind Brickell City Center, Kessa, and for all these developments that you've been a part of and many more that I haven't even mentioned here, how does it feel seeing these projects coming to life in Miami?
Well, I came here when this was a sleepy southern town with New Yorkers coming for the season. It was not what it is today. A financial center, a hub for tech people, a whole other set of residents that live here year round, not just for the season. But that means that I've seen the evolution. By the way, that's not a long time ago. That's the crazy part, how quickly the city was transformed into what it is today. Is a multifaceted place with different neighborhoods, different lifestyles as a possibility, and a place of business and leisure, both.
Did you ever imagine when you started Arquitectonica and the developments you're doing in Miami, that Miami would become a global city?
Not really. I focus on what I'm doing that day. And I had no grand plans. I just did the best I could for every project. And if it evolved into what it evolved, that's just the result of the effort, but not really with any kind of idea of where this was going.
So for those who don't know you or your firm, can you touch a little bit about how this firm started?
Well, I went to school up north in Boston, and when I graduated, there were no jobs anywhere. I met my wife over there too. We studied in the same town. I was at Harvard and she was at MIT, but that's both Cambridge, right? And I got offered a teaching job at the University of Miami. And unlike my classmates that were waiting for the job that I thought didn't exist because it was a big recession, I took the job. Hadn't been to Miami, doesn't matter. I can do the best out of any place. So I didn't go to New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles. I came to Miami. And while I was teaching at UM, my wife and I started the little firm with some friends as a studio. But lucky, the first month of having rented a little space, we got a job for a little 6-story apartment building.
Wow.
So that was it. From there, we continued, and we're lucky we had good clients because we were young. We were 24, and suddenly we had a firm, and we started getting work. And before you knew, we had the Atlantis on Brickell Avenue, 22 stories. Wow. Then the Palace, 42 stories, and we were in our 20s. So it was a lucky break that we had clients that believed in us as architects. All we can do is drawings. Okay. So, but they're going to stay in paper. You have to find people who believe in you, and they're going to take it through to build it, to finance it. And we had clients that were very nice and believed in our ideas.
Who could you consider as the one client or the one project that really puts you on the map?
Well, there's the power of television. Like today, there's the power of the internet, right? But we did a project on Brickell Avenue. We were young and bold and dreamers, called the Atlantis. And it had a hole in the middle of the building with a palm tree and a sculptural stairway and had a blue grid. We had conceived it like modern tropical city on its side, vertical instead of horizontal. So it had the grid of streets in the facade, but it was really the grid of elevators and corridors and a courtyard that was the main square in the middle of the sky. We thought it was an interesting idea. We always like to have a story behind the project. And but that was in the opening credits of Miami Vice. And the whole world watched Miami Vice. So it was, people wondered, who's the architect?
Wow.
And that probably helped us be in the minds of not just potential clients in the United States, but everywhere in the world. That's how the firm eventually grew. Now, you still have to do something for it to grow. Not just can't rely on one image. And we had done also house. It was in movies, So generally, media has a big impact. And but that way, the office grew first in New York, then in California, then in Europe, then in Asia, and then eventually South America, then Middle East, and then eventually when China opens, China. But that was at that point based largely on our portfolio.
So for a project like the HueHub, where you have 4,000 units, rent starting around $1,300 a month, in the architectural and design view and lens, what does it take to build workforce housing at that price point, and also with a design in mind?
Well, when architects go to architecture school, you go into a profession that is generally intended to have buildings that create a better society, right? There's a social purpose. We design buildings that are artistic, but it's not just a sculpture, it's occupied, and you want in some way to contribute to society. You contribute to society with everything. If you do a theater, if you do a luxury building, or you do a shopping complex, or you do a stadium, an arena, all of them have a role in the life of the community. But probably the most important component is where all those people that live and work or have activities in that town are going to live. And there's a big void in housing for the workforce. And HueHub fills a very big void in the needs of the community. And I really love the project because it has a purpose and it fills a void of demand that is there but is not taken care of very often. And the size alone tells you of the void that exists, because the developer has obviously studied the marketplace and the supply and demand. And frankly, it is well publicized that there's a gap of supply and demand, and this project will provide that supply for that demand that is out there latent.
So looking at it for the perception of the community, when they hear affordable or workforce housing, they think that it's very basic, a vanilla type of project. It doesn't have much style to it. How can this project and future projects bring more of a community where people actually want to live in and break that perception?
Well, it is true that the perception is that affordable and workforce housing has no style, so to speak. It has no artistic value. And often the perception is justified. Over decades, that kind of project has not been designed. It doesn't mean that designed is more costly. It's just that somehow it's been prejudiced, so to speak, that it could be artistic. But art is really a symbol of progress and sophistication and value. And if a project for this user has an artistic value, it is not only respectful, but it elevates the perception of a better life for the occupant. So in our designing this project, of course, we wanted to be very aware of the unit sizes, the construction cost, the fundamentals of functionality, but we also wanted to send a message of artistry, in that there was a a component of visual impact. And we thought that was important because that translates into pride of where you live. It's like saying, I'm proud I live in a certain neighborhood because a neighborhood has a personality. And you say, I live there. And we were trying to create a design that eventually will create pride in those who live there and say, I live in that neighborhood. So our intent in translating what is a very functional building into a building that is perceived as artistic was a very important part of our objective.
And how does community play within the design of a project, especially something at this scale?
Well, think of it as a small town. This is a village. And any village of this size, a village can have thousands of units, and units multiplied times number of occupants per unit. So this is fundamentally a small town. And any small town has a downtown, has a main street, has places of gathering where people get together. There's leisure, entertainment, parks, open space and enclosed space, both which are shared by the neighborhood. And that develops a sense of community. And we were looking to do precisely that. And when you look at the program that the developer had the vision to include, is not just the room where you sleep, the room where you cook, the room where you relax inside your unit. It is also the place where you can interact with your neighbors, where you can meet other people, where you get to know who are the other people living in the same complex. There is a downtown, sort of a main street, so to speak, that would exist in a small town. It just exists, in this case, within the development. So there is a parallel between what is a city that may have evolved over decades or centuries and the creation of one that includes all the components that may have evolved over time in a typical village.
So, what are your thoughts on the Live Local Act as an architect? Is this tool or this law able to really bring workforce housing?
Yes, because it's based on incentives. It's difficult to force people to do things, but if you incentivize them, they may do it. A developer has to live with the reality of their numbers. Generally, they're not building philanthropically, and generally, they're not subsidized. Very expensive to subsidize affordable housing. But if you create an incentive that if you are allowed to build more, if you also provide affordability in a percentage of that additional square footage, you may do it. And that is what's happening. It is an incentive, and the incentive is working. It's a very good way of solving a problem where there is a gap of supply and demand, and doing it through the private sector is rather clever because is using the funds of the private sector instead of the public sector through the simple idea of creating an incentive.
Do you think it's possible to incorporate luxury condominium within workforce housing or using the Live Local Act as a tool to do that? And let's say pockets that normally there's not enough inventory, but you need to have workforce there.
Absolutely. It's if you live in any village, and there's all kinds of housing within the same village, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the towns are not uniform. There's all sorts of job levels that people have, and they all live in the same town, right? So why not? Tall buildings are, as I mentioned earlier, a vertical village, and that can happen. Actually, there's precedent to this. When Napoleon III reimagined Paris, he made us subdivisions, and he would give you a plot and give you a mortgage with no interest, actually, to build. But you build the nicer homes on the street, then a courtyard, and then there were less expensive apartments on the courtyard, and developed essentially a mixed-use city. Was required to put commercial on the ground floor. I mean, he was sort of a genius, an inventor of development that was holistic to create a complete city. In a way, Live Local, to some extent, has the same elements of that Paris that was built in record time. In 25 years, the whole new city was created with all those rules to create an atmosphere that was complete, that it wasn't individual groups. It was all mixed together, and it was quite successful. Different kinds of people of different levels were sitting in the same cafe.
And just hanging out and being with each other.
Absolutely. And there's a way to be logical if you share the building, but you may have a lobby into that corner of the building, a different lobby to the other, in the other direction. But the point is not exactly creating contrast. The point, or not creating contrast, the point is that you're fulfilling the need for housing. In my opinion, it doesn't matter how you do it, whether you share, not share this, enter here, go that way. As long as that housing exists, that's what the whole point is, and it is living in the same neighborhood. So eventually, those people will inadvertently be commingling at the coffee shop down the street, at the ice cream parlor. And I think that makes city, makes neighborhood.
Makes community. People want to be together.
Sure.
So with your experience, with all these projects that you've seen, what are some elements that you look at and you're like, this has to be in here for this project to be successful? Like, what are the things that you see?
Well, I think in different cities I practice in other places, and you think of a solution for each place. I'll give you an example. In Florida, is important to have open space in your unit because outdoor living is very much part of the Florida lifestyle. So having a small terrace, some outdoor space is actually part of life here. And it's rather economical because you don't have to air condition it. The finishes are different. And yet it adds value that is much larger than its cost in terms of lifestyle. Here's a second purpose. It provides shade to the window, so it lowers energy consumption because the sun is not hitting the glass surface. There's an overhang. These are sort of tropical solutions. I don't need to do that in San Francisco. It is generally overcast. It's a little bit cooler. And if anything, you want more light. You don't need that layer of sun protection. And it's unlikely that the outdoor living would be as important in your daily life. By the way, likewise in New York. If anything, you want when the sun comes out to warm your space and help save on heating, right? Mm-hmm. So you adjust to the environment which translates into lifestyle, translates into architecture. So I practice in all these places and in many different places in the world, and I would address that that architectural condition in a different way for every place. So for Florida, what we have designed is related to the weather, the way people live, where they see value, and it would have been a different solution in Paris or New York or another place in the world, including the Middle East, for example, where yes, suddenly the heat is an issue,
Oh yeah.
but not the humidity, for example. So you think of every architectural solution for each place specifically.
Do you think other architects, when they're designing, do they incorporate elements of the environment? Because the way you're breaking it down, you're very granular with the way the sun goes up, the humidity. You think others think that way?
I can't guess how my colleagues think.
I agree with you. You can't think it, but why not ask? Because I've seen some projects that it doesn't look like there's much thought into them.
Well, it's I focus on what I'm doing, and I try to take care of those aspects.
So then,
And
what?
by the way, it also translates into the way people live within. How the kitchen, for example, there's more of a cooking culture today than used to be. And there was a time when taking a bath was the idea. Today they want to shower
Mhm.
with a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
and like that, there are many aspects of lifestyle that we think of within the unit. It is also relating to the public spaces. For example, there's a much larger awareness of fitness, and having a place where to exercise in a gym and also outdoors may be a much higher priority than it was at the turn of the century. Well, I don't think any building had a gym, And today, wellness is an important part of your life.
There it is.
So you have to think of how a society evolves and where the priorities are when you deal with the interior space, when you deal with the exterior space, amenities, and other aspects of life. By the way, in a decade, even there are details that you need to incorporate into buildings. Give an example. Originally, there was a mailroom. Today, that's not even adequate. You need a package room. People order things through the internet. They even order food. They order everything. And if you don't have a package room, where do you put all that stuff? There are older buildings in Manhattan, for example, that you arrive and you see the boxes all over the place because there wasn't the delivery culture that we live today. There was no Amazon. It was they were not equipped for that. And today we just finished a new, very large housing project in Manhattan. There was a 7,000 square foot package room. You should see. Well, New York is very specific because people order their food. You have to have refrigeration. They order the clothes come from the laundry. You have to hang them some. It is even more extreme than here because how do you carry your stuff in the subway? But it's been always like that, but more so recently. But in the nation, Miami included, people order stuff. So you got to have a package room. That is how society evolves. And therefore, the architect has to react to those trends. I don't think in those early buildings like the one I described on Brickell Avenue, we had a mailroom, but we didn't have a package room. Today, unimaginable. I give you that one example. Like that, the gym, the package room, there are many other elements of a building that deal with contemporary society. And the architect has to be always reacting to the moment. So you react to the place and the way people live. You react to the environment, how the weather affects the design of the building, and you react to the historical moment of what is out there happening that is changing the way people live.
Interesting. So looking out the next 10 years, what are trends that you're seeing now? For example, the rise of driverless vehicles, right? Autonomous cars. How do you see that playing out within the next 10 years?
Already, there's been a change in the parking culture, so to speak, because many people don't own a car. They just use Uber. They don't think they're going to own a car. So that already has changed. And there's more and more construction of mass transit in Miami. Eventually, you may think you may not need a car, or at least not multiple cars.
Mhm.
And if there's autonomous vehicles or there's other ways of transportation in the city, there'll be less traffic if you use mass transit. There'll be still traffic with autonomous cars. Now, remember, the autonomous car needs to be stored somewhere. It's not exactly that it just hangs around the street, you know. So, and it has to be maintained, but it is still fewer cars because that same car is being shared every day by 150 people. That's 150 cars that are not on the street, that because it's being fully shared, no different than an Uber is shared today. But it does affect how much parking you need to provide in a building. And we do think about it because in the ideal world, as um, an interesting architecturally could be to have a freestanding garage. Let's say instead of putting the garage under the building, right? That garage may someday, who knows when, in 30 years, be demolished to build more housing because you don't need it anymore. In HueHub, notice the garage is not under the buildings. The garage is on the side. So it's someday disposable or convertible.
Was that planned like that?
Yeah, of course.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Now, in some locations, there's no choice. The site is too small and the current parking need needs to be accommodated. It has to be under the building or tucked on the side. Sometimes you can't avoid it. And someday we'll try to find a way to convert it into another use, like loft spaces or office space, because it'll be too deep for residential, or maybe the edge becomes residential. But for now, you have to provide it. But in HueHub, you have total flexibility. You can decide to keep a part of it and not the other part. You can decide how to reuse it. Who knows, in 20 years, there'll be a different mindset and you may not need those cars.
Wow. So then in residential, these developments that have the parking below, what do you think they'll turn them into housing or?
Well, if it's in the basement, no.
No.
But if it's above grade, yes, potentially. At least a portion of it, the edge, could be converted into housing. It's the same ceiling height. More difficult for office because you need more height.
Yeah.
But for residential, but only up at a certain depth. Remember, residential needs natural light and ventilation. So that cannot be as deep as the garage, but there may be a way of accommodating residential.
Where do you think in Miami, which community is going to see the next phase of growth compared to what we've seen in Wynwood, what we've seen in Edgewater? What community can you think of that's in the very early stages?
Well, there's neighborhoods that have good geography, that they're near where people work. That is really important. The closer to your job, the better it is. And there are many neighborhoods, including where HueHub is located, that are not fully exploited. HueHub has mass transit nearby. has good access for those who still need to drive. For example, construction worker has to drive to the construction site. Sometimes he's remote. He may still need a parking space for that pickup truck.
Yeah.
There'll always still be some need for parking, but there are certain neighborhoods that are poised for transformation. One of them is where HueHub is. Another one is, for example, Little River is very central, like where Magic City is going to be developed, in near Little Haiti, or
What about Allapattah?
absolutely as well. There's a lot of underdeveloped neighborhoods that are in good geographic locations, central to a lot of job locations. So those are neighborhoods that have huge potential. There's entire neighborhoods that are in the middle of the city that have a huge potential, like Overtown West. They're still smack in the middle near Jackson Memorial for people who work in the hospitals. So we have a lot of neighborhoods with a lot of opportunity for future housing development, actually more so than other cities that are already fully developed. It's a lot tougher in New York. We designed a place called Queens West. You may have seen it across the United Nations, all those new buildings. There was nothing there. It was industrial. And look, it's like a vibrant city. There's thousands of units. We've been building now in Jersey City, because there's no other place to go. We built a fairly large project, housing project in Manhattan on 57th and 11th Avenue. But those are fines to find a location where to build, which is why Hudson Yards happened. We were involved in the master planning of Hudson Yards, and that was yards, real yards.
Yeah.
So these are underutilized sites. Miami has many underutilized sites, including places like Allapattah, like Little River, like Magic City, like where HueHub is located. There's this land that is a find compared to other cities. San Francisco had to expand into Mission Bay, which is essentially port space, industrial space, because there was no more room, but they found a way. Notice, there's cities that have the leadership that can get creative and find these locations. Actually, Miami-Dade County has creative leadership in that sense.
How does live, work, and play, how is live, work, and play used within a development, or how's that thought process? If you can, run us through that, because I've had people ask me all the time, what's live, work, and play? What's the concept? I see it on almost every development, but what's truly a live, work, and play project?
Well, there's a theory. There was an article this week in Financial Times about how Paris has been replanned into what is called a 15-minute city.
Yep.
That you can, their ideal is that you can walk, drive for 15 minutes, and there's grocer, school, job, restaurant, bookstore, everything within a 15 minutes radius. The article is interesting about how they created a reduction in traffic by creating all these bike lanes. The statistics are amazing. I wish I had memorized them. There is a very interesting article on how there are like 6 times as many people using a bike to go to work than using a car. Can you imagine? I couldn't believe it. How the traffic has been reduced and how people walk and bike. And of course, there's even electric bikes, or the assisted electric. And there's many cities analyzing the 15-minute city where you can get to your job in that short period of time and or do things within a range, whether walking or using mass transit or whichever way, being a short period of time, because that short commuting time translates into more leisure time. For some people like me, more time to work, more to design. It's but whichever way, if somebody loves what they do, they want to advance in their career. If somebody else thinks I want more leisure time, that's their choice, right? But more time not spent transporting yourself into the live, work, play, etc., the better.
I agree. I think Miami definitely needs that, especially with the traffic to move anywhere. It's like 45 to an hour,
Well, think about it. It's non-productive time.
Exactly.
That's if you add all the hours that you spent commuting in your life, you translate it into your productivity in your life or your enjoyment of life, whichever, productivity or enjoyment. It is a huge amount of time that you either wasted advancing your career or you wasted having a better standard of living.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the next 20 years, how would you like your legacy to what legacy would you like to leave here in Miami?
Oh my God.
It's a big one.
I don't think, I actually don't think of that.
Wow, that's all right.
I just do what I believe in, and I enjoy my work. So I have no plans of retirement. It's my hobby and it's my passion, and I feel in my profession I have a ideal situation because whatever I do, I'm leaving behind something for the betterment of society. So it's a good feeling, right? So why would I stop? But I don't like to think in terms of
So
legacy. That's for others to judge.
So I'll reframe it then. For somebody who's young in their career, who wants to become an architect or get into development and actually create these cities, I guess what's a piece of advice or wisdom you can share with them?
Live the day. Do the best you can that day. Just focus on doing the best job possible in the time that you're putting into your career. And if you don't love what you do, don't do it.
Amen. I'm with you.